what's going on YouTube? So today I'm going to give you my review of the Apple Watch. Now I know it's been a minute and I'm probably late to the game with the Apple Watch reviews, but better late than never, right? So the first thing, when Apple released or announced the Apple Watch, the question I asked myself is this the watch that we've been waiting for? I'm sure Apple hopes so, but the question is, do you feel the same way? Apple's entering a category that's fairly new and it's becoming very, very crowded. Now, when you think about it, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad, and now the Apple Watch, the watch has some pretty big shoes to fill. I'm not sure why they didn't call it the iWatch, but, I guess they wanted to kind of change the name scheme up a little bit. Or maybe it's the fact that calling the iWatch might, spark some jokes like, I watched them stand in line, or I watched my stock prices go up. Who knows? But it's going to be called the Apple Watch from now on. Now, you know what? As I was actually doing my Apple Watch review, I was introduced to watchOS 2 during WWDC. And you know what? I was pleasantly happy with the updates that Apple presented to the world. I really think a lot of the features that they presented should have been a part of the original release, but I'm guessing they were not ready for the original release, so I'm cool with that. But, I will say it is a bit painful to, load an application up on my watch and it takes forever. I think I've reached muscle failure a couple times trying to, look at my Feedly feed on my watch, but it just takes too long. So, native applications is something that I'm really, really excited about. Can't wait to see what developers can do for it. All right, so I opted for the Space Gray Edition, 42mm model. I think that was the best option I wanted to go with since the Black Steel just cost so doggone much. But I got the large band. Surprisingly, in the box, it actually came with a small to medium band as well, which was a nice add. Now, I kind of consider myself to have an average size wrist, and I fit the large band very comfortably in a second hole. But just keep in mind that both bands, the large as well as the small and medium band, actually have 7 adjustable holes, so you can get that perfect fit. Now, one of the other things I really like is the fact that you can actually put the watch on with one hand in comparison to some other wearables that I've used, such as the Fitbit Charge, which is very difficult to put on for some reason. Fitbit fixed that design. Now, in contrast, it's also, as you might guess, easy to actually take off the band, particularly after a long day. You don't really want to be fiddling around with trying to take a watch off, but it's really easy to take off. And I like the fact how Apple manages to keep the Sports Edition band nice and neat. So after you actually find your hole, you can just tuck it in to the interior of the watch itself, and it's very neat as well. Now, Apple offers an array of different bands for your personal taste, from leather ones as well as metal ones as well. So you can just visit their website to see exactly what other bands they do offer. Now, keep in mind, guys, this is not a standard band. You might know that already. It's actually a proprietary design that Apple came up with. And, it's kind of like, it should have been a standard band, but I actually like it. And let me tell you actually why. So I was really excited that the Moto 360 had, these standard bands that you can pretty much get from any watch store. But the issue is actually changing these bands out is very, very difficult. And I like the fact how the actual Apple Watch, you can switch them out within a minute. I mean, with my Moto 360, it took me over 10 minutes to get this thing off with the screwdriver they give me. It's just a pain, but But with all that, it does come at a price. The price range for these bands that Apple offers is, for the Sports Edition at $49, all the way up to $449 for the stainless steel version, which is insane in my opinion. I think $449 for a band is just crazy. If you think the actual watch itself doesn't even start at that price. So, I don't know. I mean, they're claiming it has some special stainless steel, but $450 is just insane. Now let's talk a little bit about the Digital Crown. Now the Digital Crown actually offers an additional way to navigate through your Apple Watch. Now keep in mind, you also will need to use the actual touchscreen in some instances when you're actually using your watch. You purely just can't use the Digital Crown, which I thought would be kind of cool, but you know, hey, that's pretty much how the watch works. Now, one other thing to keep in mind is while the Digital Crown works for scrolling as well, you're really going to find yourself using the Digital Crown more to launch your app drawer as well as use it as a back button to go back to previous screens from the watch itself. Now, the actual Digital Crown is actually really accurate at scrolling, particularly when you're looking at emails as well as text messages through your watch itself. Now, the question I always have, well, the question I've been wondering is which manufacturer who uses Android Wear on their watches is going to actually add a Digital Crown to the Android Wear watches. I know it's coming, guys. I know it's coming. So, one of the only things that really bug me about the Digital Crown is it's not centered. Like any other watch that I've ever seen and ever used, is the Digital Crown or the crown itself has always been centered. But for some reason, it's not centered on the Apple Watch. But it's not a big deal. It's just a little pet peeve of mine. All right, so the watch, one of the big things that Apple was really yelling about this watch, that it has Wi-Fi. And if you remember, after that, Android Wear, I think the Moto 360 and almost all the Android Wear watches, we have Wi-Fi too. But the question is, what does the Apple Watch support in terms of Wi-Fi? At this point, I can confirm that you can use Siri over Wi-Fi. Just make sure that you're in a Wi-Fi area that your iPhone has been connected to or is connected to. Other than that, it's not going to work. So just keep that in mind. But other apps that I've tested out is the email, the music, and the voicemail. And none of them actually do much of anything but give you the ability to view or listen to your music or your voicemail. So I guess it's all residing on the watch with its 8 gigabytes of memory. But you know what, it kind of makes sense. You don't want to open up too many applications for the Wi-Fi to support, because it's probably going to, kill the battery. I think with watchOS 2, you'll see more applications on a watch, and maybe even third-party applications use Wi-Fi as well. So that's going to be exciting to see what developers and Apple can do with the different applications that support Wi-Fi. So let's talk about Force Touch, and you know what? I think Force Touch is going to take a little bit getting used to. I do like it, but I'm a lot of times not sure exactly when to use it, but I think over time we will kind of understand how Force Touch works, and it's going to be a big benefit for us to navigate around our watch. But Apple Force Touch, it really reminds me of like something we would name a sex crime or something. But anyway, that's the name they came up with, but it's kind of a weird name. I don't get it, but it's called Force Touch. But the technology is pretty cool, and one of the apps that really makes use of it is the weather app. One of the things I like is I can actually Force Touch on the weather app once I'm in it to see different conditions, whether it's rain or the temperature or the current conditions. So Force Touch is pretty cool when it comes to the weather app itself. Now, let's talk a little bit about Apple Pay, and I'm kind of going to start off talking about Apple Pay in terms of what happened at WWDC. So, Apple, announced that over 2,500 banks have supported Apple Pay, which is something that Google Wallet or ISIS or Softcard haven't been able to do, and it's available at over a million different locations. So, in my opinion, I think Apple Pay will be the standard. But on to my point with the Apple Watch, your actual watch supports Apple Pay, and I think it's going to be a feature that's really going to get the watch to where it needs to get to. You know, with all the different credit card schemes going on, the skimmers and things like that, I think we need a new way to actually pay for merchandise inside of retail stores and even online with the Touch ID with Apple Pay. So, you know, it's really, really fast. All you have to do is just double tap on a side button, and then you just tap your phone, and you're good to go. So it's definitely a feature that I think is going to grow, particularly as more and more banks come on board with Apple Pay. So that's one really great benefit of the watch itself. Now, using Apple Pay with my Apple iPhone is extremely easy. You know, I just pull my phone out of my pocket, lay my finger on the actual home button with iTouch, and just tap the credit card machine, and pretty much that's it. But what's a little bit easier is actually using Apple Pay on the watch, which only takes 2 steps. So pretty much all I have to do is just double tap the side button, and then my credit card comes up, and then I can tap the machine itself. So it's a lot easier. I would say even someone who can't see could use the Apple Pay on the iWatch itself. Now, for those of you who are old enough, I want to kind of take you guys a step back, and I want to tell you guys a little bit about a gadget that I used to have called a pager. Now, this pager for my generation was really affordable. I think it was maybe 20 bucks a month, and it was mobile. And you know, we could actually send messages with just numbers on a pager. You know, you could actually type in 07734, and you know, it would say hello, or you can even type in, I don't know, hi with 14. So the pager actually gave us or at least my generation, a new way to communicate. And we've always had a desire to communicate, you know, in different means. You know, if you look at emojis or you look at short text, you know, it's almost taken on a new language of its own, if you know what I mean. So with the Apple Watch, you know, I can now send another Apple Watch user my heartbeat, which is kind of creepy and intimate at the same time, but I don't know, it's just something that I'm not really into. But my point is, it's another way to communicate, and you know, this is a way that we can actually express ourselves with our loved ones and friends. So, you know, sending a heartbeat, it's exclusive to the Apple Watch itself. You really can't perform this task on pretty much any other Apple device, and definitely not on any other smartphone. But you know, that's really where this watch actually ends in terms of what you can actually do on your phone versus your watch. I think what we're looking at is this watch is going to be a little bit more convenient when the applications become a lot faster. But for the most part, you can do pretty much everything on your phone itself. But in closing, I really wanted to just say that, you know, it's going to become more compelling as time goes on and developers develop more compelling applications that we just can't live without. You know, for what it's worth, you know, Apple Pay, the notifications, and the fitness tracker are pretty much the 3 functions that make this watch compelling. Other things just to consider, I guess, is it does have that cool factor. But other than that, if you're looking for any other functions on the Apple Watch, I would say wait for Generation 2.